Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael S. Seaver, and you're listening to Equal Chance to Be Unequal, my podcast about unlocking human potential through helping people disconnected from their purpose uncover and live their purpose. This is episode 2, Developing Emotional Intelligence. Back in 1995, Daniel Goleman published a book entitled Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. Goleman's research suggested that conventional intelligence, or IQ, or intelligence quotient, was too narrow a spectrum to determine an individual's true level of success in our society. So although IQ does set a strong foundation, it really does have a capacity to ignore a person's behavioral profile, what motivates them, and or their life experiences, and how those things have helped to shape their decision-making and or potential as it stands today. And under Goleman's research, there's the belief that EQ offers a more well-rounded approach to determining success in many capacities, not just purely through financial attainment. Secondarily, Travis Bradberry and John Graves published Emotional Intelligence 2.0 in 2009. And Bradberry and Graves' research found that 90% of top performers have high EQ, and that EQ is twice as important as IQ for goal achievement. They did find that there is zero correlation between EQ and IQ, but they did find some connection that EQ accounts for roughly 60% of job performance. So it is predictive of a person being good or bad at their job. So although these two very foundational works of EQ present slightly different models, both are essentially built upon 4 different tenets. 1, self-awareness; 2, self-management; 3, social awareness; and 4, relationship management. I'm going to take a few minutes to go through each of them in depth. Number 1, self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to understand your emotions, what you do well, what motivates you, and recognize how these traits impact relationships and your performance personally and professionally. If you are self-aware, you're likely confident. You don't let others' emotions rule you. You're far more willing to critically assess yourself for continual development and improvement. And in my work as an executive coach, coaching folks around the nation, I found that this is actually really, really hard. And so it's really rare for an executive that I work with to have the capacity to really, truly want to assess themselves if they're already experiencing some level of success and they don't desire to really, truly change. They just want to take their career to the next level. But if you do desire to quality check how self-aware you are, first understand your unpleasant emotions and really start to look at what identifies their causes. If possible, right, we're trying to figure out a way to confront or accept things that weren't so great from your past. So finding out what those things are is actually really critical to righting whatever wrongs exist today. And so I'm also a big fan of, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if there's a lot of recurrent unpleasant emotions, it's probably better to spend time with people who allow you to be more authentic and the more better version of yourself. Also with being self-aware, how do we keep an eye on our emotions and our feelings as they connect to our body's physical changes? Whether it's sweaty palms, whether it's crossing your arms, whether it's touching your chin, there's little things that humans do that kind of trigger or let somebody on the outside know that they're feeling stressed or something's happening. And so if we can help them track that physical reaction to some sort of a situational outcome, it's far easier to then regulate responses and emotions into the future. A third thing here under self-awareness, know who and what really triggers your emotions. I'm a big fan of personality profiles. Obviously, I use the DISC assessment and the 12 driving forces in my work. But if you have the capacity to track those personality profiles, different scenarios or situations or environments through some sort of a journal, then you can correlate and present emotion back to a historical cause of reaction. Right? This old saying that if there's some sort of reaction today, there's typically a wound from the person's past. And so a lot of my work is understanding what that wound was historically to try to move past it so that when certain scenarios happen today that would normally trigger some sort of an emotional reaction, we can stop it from happening. A great resource when we think about self-awareness or we think about the capacity to learn more about our own self-awareness is a book by Angela Duckworth. It's called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance. And she's just a really big fan through all of her research of understanding that small, focused, purposeful, disciplined actions taken every single day can really help you achieve whatever those goals are. So if you can apply that methodology to understanding self-awareness, I think that you're going to be in much better shape just a few weeks from now. Now, the second tenet is self-management. Self-management is controlling your emotions and using your awareness of them to stay flexible and act positively. People who have the capacity for self-management have a very strong ability to think before they act. They do a great job of avoiding impulsive action, and they do a good job of putting immediate needs aside to focus on long-term goals. So if you want to assess your self-management capacity, one of the very first things I want you to keep an eye on is this capacity to have others hold you accountable. I'm a big fan of peer accountability groups. I'm a big fan of obviously mentoring and coaching. There's obviously this movement in our society to have what's referred to as a personal board of directors. If you don't have those structures in your life, it would be very, very good to allow you to make your goals public and let the expectations of others and them wanting you to accomplish those goals will help you to motivate you and keep your emotions regulated somewhat effectively. So if another thing that I've seen quite a bit is that humans are very, very irrational. They're very, very emotional. And when they get into emotionally charged situations, they tend to want to make decisions really, really quickly. I'm just a big fan that if possible, let's try to wait 18 to 24 hours to close some sort of a difficult discussion. So these in-the-moment emotions can truly cloud sound decision-making. And the additional time that is offered through 18 to 24 hours really allows you to identify patterns and forecast expected outcomes to make sure that you're getting to a far better compromise, a far better win-win solution. Third thing under self-management that I think is important is if you practice positive psychology. This is pretty straightforward and simple, but if you smile more, if you laugh more, if you hold certain power poses, Amy Cuddy's TED Talk from a number of years ago, looking at what do we do physiologically to put more testosterone in our body and less cortisol, we can find ways to trigger our body and mood to be far more optimistic. I'm also a big fan in this context of something called the 5-Minute Journal. It is an app that you can get for your phone, but it also is a hardcover book that you can buy on intelligentchange.com. And for many of the clients that I serve, I will ask them to download the app, or I will buy them a version of the book so that they are really able to look back at the last probably 20 to 30 days and look at those things that they were really, really thankful for and showing gratitude for, because it really does help to shape some of the work that they're going to be doing next. Now, the third area of emotional intelligence is this idea of social awareness. What is your capacity and your ability to identify the emotions in other people, to understand their perspective, and to take an interest in their concerns? People who are very socially aware are likely really empathetic. They're great listeners. They really have a capacity to easily recognize others' feelings. They have a good capacity to avoid stereotyping and/or the judgment of others. And one of the things that I had recently been exposed to that I think that each of you would enjoy listening to, Lewis Howes has a great podcast. It's called The School of Greatness. And back on August 20th of this year, he posted a podcast of an interview he did with Dr. Shefali Tsabary. And it really talked for about an hour about some really, really interesting research that she's been doing about mixing Eastern and Western methodologies in terms of parenting styles, and the best way to be able to allow for the children in our lives to be sovereign beings and to grow up to be very, very unique versions of themselves. Because as Shefali had found through her research, many parents in our society, what they end up doing is they force the child to become the idealized version of what the parent never was. Because they end up dumping a lot of the things that they're missing in their life onto their children. And in a future podcast, I'll go into this in more depth. But I do see this repeatedly with many of the folks that I serve. So it is important to be socially aware by recognizing some of the things that parents do to their children. So if you want to assess your capacity for social awareness, I'm a big fan of, there are obviously multiple levels of listening, but being an active listener is really, really, truly listening at the deeper level. So if you can keep an eye out for a person's verbal and nonverbal cues and match them to learn something about how that person is feeling, the person's challenges, and maybe what are some of the things that you can do to jump in and help, I think there's a lot of value there. Second thing under social awareness is how do you adjust your communication to match the other person's preferences? We tend to want to talk a lot to people with the intent to respond, not necessarily just to listen and to be there. So if you can recognize what another person's thinking and behavioral preferences are and adjust your message to him or her in the moment, it gives you considerably more power. So as an example, if a person is an extrovert and they're people-oriented and they're obviously very, very optimistic and happy, it's very easy for you to change your style to be far more positive, tell good stories, and use more of an emotional appeal to them and have fun in the moment because that's what they appreciate. Even if that's not normally your style, doing that will allow you to adjust your style to him or her and engage them at a deeper level. Another thing that you could do here to check social awareness is many people in large corporations do this. You could ask your stakeholders to complete a 360-degree survey about you. I've done this a couple of times, obviously inside corporations, but more recently with a couple of executives across the country, I've facilitated something called Reflected Best Self. And it is an exercise where you reach out to many of the folks around you, let's say 50 different people, and ask them to give you one or two word definition or one or two words that would define a strength of yours, and then they have to give a story of when you most recently lived that strength in front of them. And it's a very, very good exercise to really help you to understand how people in the marketplace perceive you if you're not the type that's out there constantly getting recommendations and testimonials and doing things that you're receiving that feedback through more written or electronic means. Now, the fourth area of emotional intelligence I want to touch on real quick is relationship management. This is a person's capacity or ability to use your awareness of your own emotions together with your understanding of the emotions of others to manage interactions in the moment and over time. And the over time piece of this is really the most critical. These folks are great team players, they're excellent communicators, and they really want to help others grow and shine, but they have a capacity to manage relationships for years as opposed to just being in the moment and only talking to somebody for 30 minutes and then not talking to them again. Relationship management really is what you do on a weekly, monthly, or annual basis to make sure that you stay top of mind with other people in your network. If you do want to establish more deeply and then be able to grow relationships first, really consider offering personal vulnerabilities of yourself to that individual. It's really easy to then offer trust to that person. You're in that capacity, you're leaving less room for misinterpretation. If you're open about yourself and curious about others, really getting down to how personal their scenarios and situations, things that they're going to, it's very, very easy to then build a meaningful relationship if you've learned something personal about them. A friend of mine who lives in Illinois has a company called Roundtable Companies, and he created a game very similar to Cards Against Humanity, but his game is called Vulnerability is Sexy. So if you want to keep an eye on some of his work, just go to roundtablecompanies.com and look for the Vulnerability is Sexy game. He also has some clothing and shirts and things associated with it. But it's a really, really interesting approach to understanding relationships, as if you offer vulnerabilities of yourself, you're going to get some vulnerabilities in return. And that's really important to set a strong foundation for relationships. Now, second, with relationship management, I'm a big fan of generating thick value. And what I mean by thick value is that you customize parts of your interaction or the way that you follow up with a specific person. The more customized, the better. And I'm a big fan of the 3-to-1 rule. You should always do 3 things nice for another person, generate thick value for a person 3 times before you ever ask for anything in return. These little small acts of appreciation truly are gold. At some point, karma or the law of reciprocity will come back and you'll be served in some other way, but it doesn't have to be from the person that you generated value for in the moment, and that's okay. The third thing here under relationship management, of course, is be very, very cognizant of how you deliver constructive feedback. People do want growth and development and continual learning, but there's a way called the 6-step effective feedback process that will allow you to remove emotion from those really tough conversations and stay focused in on helping the other person, right? Take the emotion out, stay focused in on the objective action that you and or that person can take. Another way to look at this is there was a TED Talk that had come out from Robert Waldinger, who is the director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And through basically 80 some odd years of tracking people from Harvard and some other areas of Boston, what they found is that what leads to a long, happy, and healthy life isn't power, money, fame, success, the various things that you see via the mainstream media today. what really is the most meaningful to a long, happy, and healthy life is the quality of the relationships around you. If you want to be great at emotional intelligence and you want to be very, very happy and live a long and happy life, then really having depth to your relationships by understanding the various pieces and components of emotional intelligence is going to lead to some very, very meaningful exchanges and information for you. Guys, in the short period of time that we've had together, right, we got to look at self-awareness. We got to look at how do we self-manage. 3, we looked at social awareness. And 4th, looking at relationship management, really understanding some of the work that has been done by Daniel Goleman or by Travis Bradberry or by Gene Greaves. We're looking at how important is emotional intelligence to our growth and development. So thank you for listening to episode number 2, Developing Your Emotional Intelligence of Equal Chance to Be Unequal. I'm Michael S. Seaver. I'd really be super grateful if you liked, shared, or commented on this podcast on my website, michaelsseaver.com, my Facebook page, my Instagram profile, LinkedIn, Twitter, and or YouTube.